Welcome, real estate enthusiasts. This is Alberta to Arizona. I'm your host, Tracy Gray, and we have this show to bring you information on buying, selling, and investing in properties in both Canada and in the United States. So, to do so, we've got the stars of the show. We've got real estate extraordinaire Devin Gray with Mogul Realty here in Canada, and he's with EXP Realty Group as well. And then down in the States, the beautiful and incredible professional real estate agent Diane Brennan, who's down in Phoenix, Arizona, USA. And right now, there's so much that's happening in the world that's affecting real estate. This is the perfect time to be talking about it. So, Devin, you had mentioned a couple of things in Canada that were happening right now that's affecting how you buy, sell, and invest in real estate. And Diane, you've got some big things too. So, Devin, do you want to start?
Yeah, just quickly. So we do like to talk about how to transact in real estate between Canada and the United States, specifically Alberta and Arizona. But it's a big topic around the world, especially in North America, and that's rising inflation. Big news in Canada today. It was announced where inflation was in May, and it's 7.7%. That's the largest or the highest inflation we've had in Canada in 40 years, which brings us back to the early 80s when we saw, 18, 20, 22% interest rates and people walking away from houses and stuff like that. We're not there yet. We'd like to think we've learned our lessons from history, but we were chatting before we started recording about, the comparisons about what's going on between Canada and the United States. And Diane, you've got some great information that we thought was really relevant to share.
Well, the good news is that anyone who's interested in investing in Arizona, things are going to get a lot better. We've been in a seller's market where it's been very difficult to get any properties. It's very competitive. We just haven't had the inventory, which is great news for our Canadian sellers who wanted to sell in Arizona. But for buyers, it wasn't that good. So now in the last 28 days, we've had 34% more inventory come on the market in 28 days. We've never seen that. Highest recorded in the history, I think, of the Cromford Report, which is a data analyst that analyze data daily here, which is unusual. It's kind of the only resource in the United States similar that we are lucky enough to have that in Arizona. So since they've been recording this data, they've never seen anything like this. So what it means is people have a lot more choices. Prices may be, it may affect prices. If we were to stay normally, with the seller's market and it gradually changing, but we're kind of getting slammed into a balanced market, and then we don't know what's going to happen. It's happening much quicker than we initially thought. So big changes here. So investors in Edmonton who are looking into Arizona are going to be pretty excited. We no longer have the big funds we've had a huge amount of hedge funds that have been buying up property in the $0 to $500,000 range. They have actually stopped buying, and a ton have canceled their escrows, which I don't know if you guys use that terminology, but once a buyer deposits earnest money, it's in escrow. So that's what we call it. I don't know if you guys use that terminology, but a lot have canceled. And have forfeited their earnest money and are just walking away because they want to see what's going to happen in the market. They feel that's a sign that prices are potentially going to come down. So, Mike,
Yeah, so
Laura,
we just quickly. So we use more just that it's held in trust, but certainly, we certainly have had people walk away from deposits. I'm curious, what was the purpose for these hedge funds purchasing all these properties en masse? Was it to use as rentals, or what exactly were they doing with these properties?
oh yeah, for rentals. So
Okay.
yeah, for rentals and stuff. And then, when inflation is high, that's generally real estate's a good investment to put into, and the stock market's volatile, and they're just putting a lot of their funds into, for rental properties for
Yeah.
sure. So people that live here that are first time home buyers, or just, people that reside in Arizona were forced to rent because there's a huge chunk of that market that the funds were just gobbling up, and these people
Yeah.
had no place to live and forced to rent. So
It's interesting because Tracy and I, prior to getting on, we're talking about how, and we've all been in the media, Tracy still is, and how the media likes to sensationalize everything and really present a sky is falling type of situation. And yet you're describing, if I'm hearing correctly, an opportunity for buyers down in the United States, whether they live there or potential Alberta purchasers that couldn't get in. I mean, houses were selling so quickly and they were selling for top dollar. And this sounds like there's an opportunity now for people to actually take their time and find a property, not be rushed, do a bit of due diligence, and get themselves a decent price. Is that what we're hearing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But because things are changing and with our inflation here too, and interest rates increasing, people are a little hesitant because they're like, oh, our price is going to go down. So Michael Orr, who created the Crawford Report, did a great article on how human nature drives the market. And when you have a stampede, how stampedes can be dangerous. And if people believe that interest rates are going to go high and prices are going to go down, they're going to behave in a certain way that actually may cause that to happen. So it's really fascinating, the things he said. He has his report, and I'd read it, but I'm scared I'm going to stumble all over it. But he just says greed in the housing market was the primary cause of the Great Recession of 2008. Greed caused people in 2004 through 2006 to do all sorts of crazy things with crazy loans with dodgy lenders, and crooked borrowers equally to blame. So when prices stopped moving higher, and they always do at some point, all those loans fell apart. Supposedly safe mortgage-backed securities collapsed in value and fear took over the market. That was actually a slow-moving train wreck that ran from 2004 to 2011. Now, the situation in 2022 is very different, yet it is similar in some important ways. Many people have made a lot of very large paper profits in housing over the past 10 years without having to resort to loan fraud. So those profits have been especially large in the last 2 years. And what is driving the market today is fear of those profits disappearing. So if they sell now, those paper profits become hard cash, always useful when the rest of the economy is going a bit wonky, or they can be converted into different assets using a 1031 exchange. Hard cash profits incur capital gains tax, so the 1031 exchange looks like an attractive way to avoid that tax. However, if you exchange into something that is exposed to the same market risks, your profits stay at risk too. Cash can be exchanged for almost anything, not love though, but cash itself is still a poor vehicle. Yeah. Cash itself is still a poor vehicle to store wealth when inflation is running to close to 10%. So if we were all logical, it would make sense for everyone to stay invested in the housing market and sit tight. Mm-hmm. But we as human beings are not logical at all. Fear will cause some people to sell, and those people can easily spook more people. And with the social media environment we now inhabit, a stampede is happening almost as soon as you realize what is going on. The promotion of disaster stories gets a lot of clicks, and clicks reward the poster, no matter how untrue their content might be. You could say it is logical to be fearful because fear is highly contagious. Fear of the market going down can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If there is a stampede, injuries occur. An orderly exit is almost impossible to engineer. Human nature makes everyone want to do the same thing at almost the same time. So what started as an orderly cool down in March here in Arizona quickly turned into a flight to safety in April and May. And now we seem to have a stampede for the exits developing in June. The rise in interest rates was a signal for this to happen. It was not the only cause, because if supply has stayed low, it could have coped with a significant fall in demand. But it is not just lower demand we're facing, but far higher supply because of the rush of homeowners wanting to exit the market. New listings are coming in from all directions. So where prices are, we don't know yet, and if they are going to remain low. And there's more to that report, and I'm happy to send that to anybody who wants to read it, because it is fascinating how that human nature affects the market. But I think that, whenever there's a change in the market, it's always an opportunity for somebody. And this is a great opportunity for Alberta buyers to get into the market if prices do go down, at least to have more competition in there. So we have a strong rental market still. People need places to live. People are moving here all the time. So it's a great investment for Albertans.
Well, you had mentioned triggers for the stampede is seeing more homes coming on the market makes people panic. And you said that your numbers are way up right now for that as well. There's a lot more on the market.
34% more in the last 28 days. Yeah, the highest we've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, you talked about social media, and we mentioned before about how the media will sensationalize and kind of stir that going, and then all it means is that some social media influencers will take that and run with it, and that's going to help to cause that stampede. But from an investor standpoint, and most everybody's heard of the New York real estate magnate Barbara Corcoran, who's on Shark Tank, and I read her quote. I don't know if it's hers or not, but I read it years ago that the best time for investors to buy is during times of uncertainty. And that's exactly what you're talking about there. And also that contrarian idea that if everybody's doing one thing, it's a good opportunity to go in the opposite direction. I'm curious about this as well. So is that a professional real estate only accessible report, or is that something that people can access, or basically they should go through you to get access to it?
Yeah, you have to be a realtor to have a subscription to it. So,
okay. So reach
I'm
out
happy
to
to
you,
share it.
And they'll hear from you every day if they want to see it.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah, it does sound really interesting. Certainly would like to, because there's a lot of world truths to it as well. I mean, I know that it sounds like the report is Arizona and Phoenix focused, but those are, especially when you're talking about human nature and stuff like that.
sure.
And we are all motivated by fear and greed, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens. A big thing that we talked about on our other Facebook post was, a lot of people want to know, what do I do? And we have talked a lot now about the fact that people can get caught up in the stampede, as you mentioned, when really everybody's situation is entirely different. First off, are you looking to buy or sell because of an investment situation, or are you looking to buy because you're a homeowner? And it's tough to say in regards to what that necessarily means. As a homeowner, you're ultimately only interested in making that purchase because you want to buy. Well, if you're buying, what does that matter? What does that mean? And you shouldn't necessarily get caught up too much in regards to stuff that ultimately affects everybody else, when it really comes down to what are your needs, your wants, and what's your personal situation.
Well, and I have one buyer currently, and he's purchasing right now, which is kind of at the height of the market. And I said, you can't look at whether are you buying at the right time. Like, you have to buy. He's going through a divorce. He has to sell. He has to buy. The market's cyclical. It goes up and it goes down. If you're a long-term hold, we get 30-year mortgages here.
Yeah.
I said, for 20,000, let's say you pay 20,000 over market, you are holding on to this property. It's going to work itself out. So you have to look at the long term. And I agree with you 1,000%. Everybody's situation is absolutely individual. So
yeah, it's interesting how people will purchase real estate, which is very much a long-term play, and then they'll look at the market, a week later, similar to looking at a stock price and seeing, oh my gosh, my house has fallen in value by $5,000. I overpaid. It's like, well,
and the weird thing is,
bought it a week ago.
Right, but they're worried about losing, value of $20,000, but then they'll go to these real estate places that are, will buy cash for houses or whatever, and they'll lose $60,000, not blink an eye, just so they can avoid showings. So I'm like, what is wrong with you people? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, mind is blown.
Yeah.
So because you don't want to showings, you're willing to lose 60,000, but you're worried about if your home value drops a few $1,000s. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And we don't make sense as human beings. So as agents and in the business, we need to understand that. And that's part of our job.
I'm sure you do this, Diane, too. And I hear Devin doing it all the time, reminding people that when they buy the home, it's usually for the long haul. You're not planning on buying it for a month, 2 months, like you're in it for years, not just a couple of weeks. So.
Yeah, it's security. And, I know in Canada, I mean, it just still blows my mind that you guys have to, refinance every 5 years. Here, you can get a 30-year mortgage and it's guaranteed, other than your property taxes increasing, or usually not lowering, but increasing. That's about the only difference. So that's such an insecure feeling, you know what I mean? Anyway, I'm just saying why Arizona is better. Just kidding.
So there are longer term terms, 10 plus years, but the interest rate is so high that it was ridiculous for anybody to do it. And that's the challenge really the banks really do kind of force you along. I mean, you see so many, there's more people now that get into, I think, 3-year terms, because the 3-year term will be a little bit less than the 5-year term. And, but what the bank is banking on is that interest rates are going to go up in 3 years. And so they don't want to necessarily see somebody tied into a longer term because of the fact that they do want to, they've got to find their way of making money. And people always focus here on the lowest possible rate, and nobody ever really focuses on what that means. The bank is going to make their money one way or the other, and a lot of times what happens is that they'll offer these low rates, but people don't necessarily focus too much, and the banks don't necessarily draw too much attention about the early buyouts. If you buy a house, you're in it for 5-year term, but you got to sell in say 2.5 to 3 years, and you've got this $12,000 payout to break your mortgage early. And it's just absolute, well, that's how the bank's going to get their money. That's why they offer such a low rate. That's not always the situation, but in a lot of cases, you really do need to know. And so that's why a lot of times we drive people to working more with mortgage brokers as opposed to bankers, because the bankers are only promoting their specific products, whereas the mortgage broker is going to truly sit down and say, hey, do you think you might be selling your house in 3 years? Well, maybe you shouldn't be looking at 5-year fixed. I mean, I've got somebody that I know of that just refinanced their mortgage to lower their rate to a much lower 5-year fixed, and 4 months later he's selling his house. So he's got this giant payout that the banks never really told him much about. Yes, he lowered his rate, but he's got this big payout. So the bank's winning in the end.
I'm rolling my eyes at the banks because they make their money anyways with their nickel and diming and all that kind of stuff. But that's how we got into trouble in Arizona in 2007. It's people had this low interest rate, and we called that predatory lending. So the mortgage companies had, the small interest rates. Then 5 years later, all of a sudden their payment balloons to a huge amount they can't afford, and these people have to foreclose. So it's ridiculous. So yeah, here we have and I mean, this isn't a contest. We all need shelter. So I'm not saying, a lot of people can't live in Arizona, but I just did, to talk about the differences, 30 years, a fixed rate, and there's no prepayment penalty. That is the norm down here. It should be like that in Canada. So people don't have to worry about shelter. Like, that's ridiculous, especially if inflation's taking more of our paychecks with our normal, food, shelter, gas. Oh my gosh, all of that stuff. And then to have to worry about a huge jump in payments. Those banks should be ashamed of themselves, my mother would say.
Yeah, and you know what? This is such a hot topic right now. You guys are going to be talking more about it this week with Mogul Realty Group, as they're doing a presentation.
Less than a week away.
Buying property around the world. And so, Diane, you're going to be speaking at that?
You're a panelist.
That's right.
I'm a little nervous. I'm a little nervous.
You'll do great. Yeah. You'll do great. Yeah, we were just chatting about it yesterday in our sales meeting. And so you're on a panel with talking about various areas around the United States. And then we also have an international presenter talking about Central America. Very, very huge pre-registrations. It's one of our biggest ones that we've had in a
pressure.
while. There's a lot of people that are curious because it hasn't really been a topic for a long time. I mean, I don't necessarily think there's been a lot of people focused on buying outside of Canada. I can't really remember since the dollar was at par or even $1.16 to the US back in 2008, 2009 and stuff like that. So I think it's something that's quite timely, and we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. I can tell everybody why Arizona would be the best investment.
Yeah.
And why.
In the meantime too, how can people reach you, Diane, and get a copy of that report from you?
Sure. My email is can'trememberheremail@gmail.com. And my phone number is 602-620-2277. My website is thatrealestateshow.com. And I'm with Coldwell Banker Realty. Nice. Have to say that to keep it legal.
That's
there
right.
You go.
You
yes.
gotta get that in there. Get that in there. And then Devin, how do they?
Yeah, Mogul Realty Group, NDXP. Devin Gray. The email is Devin, DEVIN, @mogulrg.com. Cell phone is 780-951-9279.
Great. Yeah, so much to talk about, and we will be carrying that on with the Mogul presentation. Hopefully you guys can join that. Otherwise, reach out to these two, and we're back every week with a new episode, so we'll see you again then for Alberta to Arizona Real Estate Show. Thanks for watching.